Question I get most after a stretch of belief work is typically some version of, okay, but does this actually work? Like for real people. Does this changing my mindset make a difference? And do people really come out feeling different, making different choices on the other side? And this week, I am going to be answering that question with a story. So I'm going to walk you through a real client example, someone who came in looking like the classic high achiever in a career rut and left with a completely different way of existing. Now, this client came to me in the middle of a career transition. She had just left a job that wasn't working, went back to a previous company to get some breathing room, and she was trying to figure out what came next. On the surface, it looked as if she had a career problem, a what do I do with my life problem, but that was not the case. And at the end of our work, she knew that too. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a career and mindset coach, and for the last 9 years, I've worked with driven, capable people who look successful on the outside and yet feel stuck, disconnected, and unfulfilled on the inside. And this series has been all about the belief work that makes change possible. But today, I want to show you how this work looks in real life, what it looks like when someone goes through this process, how their life could change. So I'm going to walk you through this past client story from start to finish, where she was, what we did, where she ended, because if you're anything like me, you love an example. So let's get into it. When we started working together, this client was in a way more common place than people realize, and it might be where some of you are. She was not actively in a crisis. She just knew something was off. That's the first thing I really want you to understand about her. She had not hit rock bottom. She was not falling apart. She was capable and self-aware and high functioning, like most of the people I see. Her career looked incredible from the outside, but the bigger issue was this internal disconnect that she felt. And so when she came to me, it wasn't necessarily one specific crisis moment. It perhaps felt like that, but it was really just that she had been ignoring her internal signals for so long that when it finally caught up to her, it felt like a surprise. It felt sudden, but it wasn't. It never is. And so this client, her challenge was she had this really clear definition of success, what it was supposed to look like, where you're always up-leveling, always moving forward, always increasing your title and your prestige. And it was not only a very exhausting way to live, but it wasn't even what she wanted. And that's the interesting part that I actually see a lot with clients, is she knew this definition of success wasn't entirely hers. She knew a lot of what wasn't working. She was self-aware enough to name the patterns, and she knew how to articulate the pressures that she felt in her life. And she even knew how to tell herself the right things. So on her intake form, she said something along the lines of trying to convince myself that there is no right or wrong choice. She knew that she needed to work on this black and white thinking intellectually, but knowing something and living from it are completely different things. And while she understood this stuff conceptually, she didn't feel or act like there was no such thing as a right choice or a wrong choice. In fact, she had a ton of pressure around all of her choices. So you can say that to yourself all you want, but if you don't actually believe it, what good's it gonna do? And that's where this client was. She was saying the right words, but she had zero embodiment behind that. And that really exemplifies her at the start of our work. What she needed was not necessarily more information or more self-awareness, because she was self-aware, but she needed someone to actually hear her concerns, give space to them, validate them, instead of just shaming them or making her feel like, oh, I'm gonna not think that anymore. And then help her parse out the noise versus what was actually true for her, to move something that she already knew in her head into her actual way of being. That gap is where our coaching lived. So in our work, we started where I pretty much always start, not with career strategy or answering what should I do next, but with the belief system underneath everything. So she mapped out her shoulds, she traced where her pressure came from, she sorted out all of those inherited messages about what her career was supposed to look like, and she started to understand how much of her career and her life was never actually hers. It was just running on autopilot. And within that process, she flagged another very interesting concern, which might be coming up for some of you. Somewhere in that process, she said that she was scared, not of our work, but of what would be left when she removed that external noise. She was scared that when she peeled all of the external pressures away, she would have no self at the core of it. She wouldn't know what she actually wanted because so much of her personality had been made up from the external. I want to highlight that for a second because this fear is so much more common than almost anything else I see, and people almost never say it out loud. It is this fear of, what if I have been performing so long that I have completely lost my real self? I've lost access to them. The pressure's been running me so long that I don't know who I am without it. And that's a really scary feeling. But what I told her, and what I want you to hear too, is that your true self was never lost. It's just buried. I think of it like a little compass that we throw in the bottom of our backpack. And over time, we start throwing all this other stuff on top. Eventually, when it comes time to dig that compass back up, there's a lot of stuff on top of it. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It might feel like we lost it forever, but in reality, we just have to do some unearthing first. And so for this client, we dug. I stayed there with her as a coach to help walk her through it, those scary moments. And we were able to actually soften all that external noise. And then, only then, could we have the conversation about who she actually was. What we did was really gradual. We took it little by little, started alleviating those shoulds. By the time we got to the identity work and the values and the interest mapping, she was ready for it. Not because her magical answer had clicked, but because she had done enough clearing out that she could finally hear herself again. The answers were a lot easier to find once that noise was down. By the end of our work together, something had fundamentally shifted with her, and it wasn't necessarily about her career. And that's a part that I want to be clear about because I think it's one of the most important pieces of her story. When she came to me, she thought she had a career problem, a direction problem. And while she did feel those things, those were simply symptoms of the deeper problem that she had. She had become a worker bee who was completely ignoring herself, who was solely doing things off of external pressures, and her real self had almost ceased to exist. By the end, she was actually a three-dimensional human who knew who she was, who knew what she valued, and who could actually make decisions from that place. She said she was at peace with being decidedly undecided, knowing herself, but knowing that her career wasn't going to be her whole identity, decentering that, and coming back home to her actual self. So while our solve was kind of about her career, it also wasn't at all. And I know that might sound anticlimactic if you're in that before space right now, if you're hoping that this work ends with a clear answer and a perfect next step. But what she was describing wasn't emptiness, it was freedom. For the first time, this client was not measuring herself against a definition of success that was never actually hers. She wasn't white knuckling her way through life. She was just being herself. And she had started moving from her own values and making decisions based on what she actually wanted. And while that might sound small, it's actually pretty freaking revolutionary. She said she felt so much lighter than she had in years. And that realization that there is no single aha moment, no dream job that solves anything, that felt liberating to her. That ongoing practice of knowing yourself well enough and to keep choosing aligned choices, that felt like more than enough. And suddenly, this deeper paradigm shift is not a consolation prize. It is the prize. So if you're watching this and recognizing yourself in any of her story, that is probably not a coincidence. This is a pattern, and it's one that I've seen a lot. So if you want to do this work with support, like this client did, one-on-one coaching is where we go the deepest, and we have the most specificity to tailor this to you. The one-on-one coaching details and applications will be below in the description, and there's no pressure on that, but it's just a place to start the conversation if you're ready. So next week, we're going to talk about something that trips people up right about this stage. The mindset reframes start landing, but then you abandon it before it has time to stick. And we're going to be talking about what you can do to ensure that that change actually follows through. So come back for that. In the meantime, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.